Hey everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, March 22nd of 2026. Now, I had an interesting conversation with a couple of my sisters this week, and we had this realization, which we actually have all the time, but it was just a really in-depth conversation with a couple of my sisters, realizing that the things that we have seen in our lifetime, the exponential change, the things like rotary phones, and when we grew up, we had a party line at one point, and pulling the cord around the corner so that we could have privacy. And then when answering machines come in and video cameras came in, and my very first video camera was a great big camera that sat on my shoulder, and it held a VHS tape. That was the tape. So we just kind of started talking about that, and then we've just watched the exponential changes even since 2020. And as I sat down this week with my journal, this really just, I thought I'm going to just share my perspective as a person. I'm a couple months from 65. And, I've been dipping into, the whole getting Medicare thing, and that kind of freaks me out. I don't like the way it's set up. I don't like the medical system. And I think trauma care is absolutely where we shine. And there's other things. You can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But there's a lot of things that I'm watching that don't feel congruent with me, even at a higher level, that is just such a fascinating place to be. So I'm just going to go through what I wrote in my journal this week, which I think some of you might be able to relate with this. And if you're in a younger generation and you're listening to this, hopefully there'll be a couple of nuggets in here that you can, see yourself in and realize really at the highest level what a gift it is that we have to be here during these times. This is a special, special time. And talking about this with my sisters, and then sitting down with my journal and writing some of this stuff out made me realize, holy cow, we are in a generation where we get to see exponential change. And it's a magical time, and you can make it more magical, or you can make it a horrible time. You can become a victim of it, or you can make it magical. Okay. So here's where I started with my journaling. I've lived long enough to know when something real is happening. That's the first thing that dropped into me, because I can see, and I use my intuition, when something real is changing. I knew at the beginning of 2020 exactly what was happening. Now, there's a lot of details that flowed in later. A lot of things have been exposed since then, but at the deepest part of me, and even just all the surface level parts of me, I knew that that we were going into really interesting times. So, at almost 65, I've seen the world change more times than I can count. Okay, I've watched people all through this whole thing, and even in other times, panic, adapt, resist, and then reinvent themselves. That's what humans do, right? I've done all those things myself more times than once, more times than once. So when I say that this moment feels different, I don't mean it feels dramatically different. I just mean it feels humanity changing different. And that might be dramatic, and I guess in a way it is, but not in the drama kind of, not in a really dramatic kind of a way, right? So what I mean by this, I mean familiar in a deeper way. So it feels familiar in just a deeper way. So like the feeling you have right before your life changes, like right before you get married, right before you give birth to your first baby. And as a woman who's given birth a couple of times, I can say that when something changes and we're at the precipice of something, you get ready to give birth, your life's going to change forever. Okay. No one has to tell you all about it. You just know that once you bring another living human into this world, you're responsible for them and all of that. That's what this feels like. That's what this whole thing feels like to me. It seems like it's familiar. I mean, a familiar in a deeper way. So like the feeling I have right before my life changes, and you don't even have the words for it. So that's kind of how this feels. I know a lot of people are looking around right now thinking this, what is going on, and why does everything feel so unstable? We've been saying that for a while now, right? And here's the thing. I feel like at this point, and I don't have all the answers, but I feel like I understand. And I really do. I feel like I really understand I don't know exactly what things are going to look like, but this is why I say I have this massive excitement for where humanity's going, and it's magical. And if you take advantage of this magical time, I believe you can come through it and not just survive, but you can thrive. I really believe that. But I want to say this, as someone who's lived through enough cycles to recognize these patterns, okay, this is what it looks like when something old is breaking down. Okay, this is just what it looks like. And it's what I always like to tell people is you don't want to go destroy the old system. You just want to opt out of it. And then it just goes away on its own. It dissolves. If it doesn't get used, it dissolves. So it's like fighting against, it's like the war on drugs. That just made more drugs come into the whole scene. Just opt out. Just create something new. Work on a new system, all this stuff. So what looks like something's breaking down, it just simply means that something new isn't fully formed or created yet. Okay, it can be uncomfortable, it can be messy, and it can be scary. And that's how it's supposed to be, because the uncertain things are always scary. They're always messy. It's all part of it. It's all part of the game. It's part of this simulation, this matrix. It's all part of it. And if you look at it from that perspective, then everything changes. Okay. Okay, so what I wrote here doesn't mean that all this is meaningless. Okay, it's quite the opposite. And here's what I wrote. I didn't come here to understand all of this stuff overnight. I've spent years and decades really doing the kind of inner work that I think a lot of people either aren't willing to do or don't realize they have the option to do it. Or maybe they do, they just don't want to do it. So I've done things like energy work, past life regressions, plant medicine, tons of meditation, sitting in silence, sitting with myself alone. I had this walk that I do, and even during COVID, when it was like some of the worst part of it, especially the lockdowns in 2020, that winter, I remember I felt so discouraged for humanity, because it seemed like everyone was just acquiescing. People were just folding, and of course all that changed over time, but I was completely shocked at how long it took for more and more people to see. And I guess at this point, I'm not shocked now that it takes a while, but I would go on this walk and I would bundle up. I'd put like whole tons of layers on because it was winter. And I would sit on this rock that was along my walk. And it was in someone's yard, on their edge of the yard, but it faced a busy street. And I'd sit on this rock in the freezing cold and I would cry. And I only say that just to say, like, I'm just a human being as well, going through this, realizing who I am. And all of these layers of things that I've experienced and things that I've done have given me this higher perspective. And I'm grateful for all the stuff. I wish I could have moved through it quicker. I think of all the times when I just felt despair, and I guess that's just my path. But so I wrote here, sitting with myself and crying a lot, and having a lot of aha moments. Okay, I wasn't doing all of these things to escape my life. I was doing a lot of it to understand. I wanted an opening, like the plant medicine journeys I've done. I wanted to crack open my higher self. I wanted a direct connection to the divine, which I know we have, but I believe that that's why plant medicine, like psychedelics, are here, is to help us remember who we are. And you can't just, people do this for entertainment. I've never done that. I don't even suggest people go into that realm unless you are very strategic, you have intention, you have someone carefully facilitate. And I've said all this before, but that was my intention. So I didn't do any of these things to escape my life. I wanted to simply understand it better. So here's what I realized. Along the way of learning all these things, you can't unlearn them. It's like once you see something, you can't unsee it, okay? So then here's what I wrote. There's more going on here than what we see on the surface. This is one of the deepest things that I think a lot of us have realized. There's so much more going on than what we just see on the surface. And this has never become more startlingly clear than right now, okay? So, and then I wrote this, at the same time, I'm not floating somewhere above reality, pretending that everything is love and light. that is definitely not me. I am a very grounded, I've said many times, I'm a Taurus. I'm extremely grounded, and my foundation, my safety, my security, my certainty, this is all things that are really important to me just because of my astrology. Okay. So I've learned a lot of things. I've been through a lot of stuff in my life. I've been through a lot of stuff, and I'm not the only one. Every single person, I don't care if you're in your 30s or 60s or 70s or 80s, we've all been through things. They're just different things, a lot of hard things. Nobody is unique and has this perfect sail through the world in this lifetime perfectly, right? I've had to rebuild parts of my life from the ground up, and I feel like I'm still doing that. I'm also a grandma, which, I have a granddaughter who'll be 15 this summer and a grandson who will be 13. So I've been a grandmother for a long time, but all of this stuff, what I wrote, it gives me a very real perspective on what actually matters. I think it always does. Family always does that, right? So through all of this, I've been able to stay grounded. I think partly just because that is my nature, but what it's done for me is really something simple. Um, well, here's what I wrote. Through all of this, I've stayed grounded in these simple things. Take care of my physical body, stay connected to nature, listen more than I react, and pay attention to world events and money, especially right now. That I just want to touch on that for 2 seconds because I think people need to pay attention to what's happening in our monetary system. And I don't, I just, this interests me. And it always has since I was young. And money makes sense to me. I like looking at what's happened economically. I love watching, and I am very intuitive when it comes to money, building a business, but our monetary system is changing, and I believe this is something that only happens once in multiple lifetimes. Like this is there's money that's changing right now, and I believe you should pay attention. You should start asking people that you trust, someone who maybe understands what's happening. I believe that this is really, really, really important, and there's a narrow window right now where you can make a difference in the life that you and your family lead. So that's all I'll say about that. So, taking care of the physical body, staying connected to nature, listen more than I react. And this is how I've always believed, because this is compound. No prescriptions, just plants, intuition, and what I learned growing up. With a house full of all my siblings, we all just lived a messy, imperfect life, just like everyone. Okay, that's how it's supposed to be. So when I look at the world today, I'm not seeing it as someone who's removed from reality. I don't feel that. I'm seeing it from someone who's been there, who's lived it. Okay. And here's what feels true to me now. The chaos that people and a lot of people, including myself, sometimes are reacting to, it's not just happening out there. It's not just out there. Okay. It's now happening. So it's also what happens when everything we've been relying on, like our beliefs, our systems, all our sense of control, our sense of control, all is shifting at once. Okay, and it's very disorienting. And to be honest, it's honest. A lot of the thing is, let's see, how did I put this? The thing is that a lot of what's falling away is not as solid as we thought it was. These were just illusions. These were you really like you probably already know this. This is probably I'm sure I'm probably preaching to the choir. Okay, so let me just say it like this. We can keep blaming the world for feeling unstable. We can go, okay, well, it's out there's fault. That's why I feel unstable. It doesn't have to be that way, okay? That's the victim mentality. Who wants to live there? We're being asked to become something more stable within ourselves. That's what we're being asked. So this is not something everyone wants to hear, okay? That's the part. So it's easier to do this, to scroll, to react, to argue, or just to shut down. I've had moments where I just shut down. It just feels easier to me. I feel pretty grateful I haven't been lost down the scrolling of all the social media and all this. I've had little moments of that. But what I typically do is I will, when things feel super unstable, and I just kind of shut down. I go quiet, and I typically will go out, I'll go in nature, I'll go on a hike. And maybe that's not shutting down, but that I go within and I try to heal myself. I try to make sense of it all. So that's just how I do it. But some people think it's just easier to scroll, react, argue, or shut down. It might be harder to ask this question: who am I being in the middle of all of this? Okay, because whether we like it or not, we are individually influencing what happens next. So that might not land with you maybe today, but think about this: everything that we each individually do, whether it's we act like a victim, we don't take care of our health, we don't pay attention to what's happening, we're not, everything that we're doing or not doing basically is influencing what happens next. And I know many of you know that. And I think it's just a little bit, you can never hear it enough. Okay. So to me, this is not like these little things I'm saying, when we influence the world and what happens next, it's not like some big grand dramatic thing. It's exactly like the compound effect. In fact, if you've never read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, I would suggest that you pick it up. It's a timeless book. It's been out for a long time, and it's a book that I've read several times. My sister has teenage daughters. My grandkids they've read this book because the little things that you do compound into great big things. Great big things. It's an amazing little read that will inspire and motivate you no matter where you are in your life. So this is what I think. Instead of the big dramatic stuff, it's the small daily ways of the small daily things that you do every day. The things we pay attention to, how we respond to stress, how we feed, what we feed with our energy. So what is it that we feed with our energy? Where are you giving your attention and your energy? You're feeding either the not good stuff, or you're feeding the good stuff, the creative stuff. Okay. And how we treat people when it's inconvenient. That one is super important. Okay. So I feel like that's where the real shift is happening, is in all these little things. So I've come to see reality as something that's more fluid. Okay. Reality is more fluid. This is where I'm talking about a simulation, a field, consciousness, whatever language fits there. Okay. But the point is this: it's not fixed. That's what we need to realize. And honestly, I think that, I say all the time, I'm a Taurus, I'm fixed, I like my foundation, and all of that is true. But I've also realized at certain points during my lifetime, that piece of me has actually hurt me sometimes, because I so much want my certainty and my solid foundation that I stay in situations or whatever longer than I should, because I just want that security. And I've realized that reality is not fixed, and I can still feel solid, because I can feel solid in here, right? And it can serve me to actually blow up a bit of my foundation if I need to, because the option is not good. So here's what I wrote. The point is, it's not fixed, but what this means in this moment is, let's see, which means this moment isn't fixed either. Okay, that means whatever moment you're in, it's not fixed. You can change it. You can automatically, it's like pausing. Like a few weeks ago, I did a little video about taking a breath and pausing before you react. If you take a few seconds and you pause, everything changes, because your response is different. Okay. So to me, this is actually really encouraging. It means we're not stuck. It means we're not stuck in all this chaos. It means we are actually participating in it. We're participating not in the chaos. We can choose to participate in the chaos, but we don't have to. So this is what I wrote. At this stage in my life, I'm not interested in being reactive anymore. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do it. I'm more interested in being intentional. I want everything I say, every interaction I have with people, every decision I make. I have just reached this super high point in my life with the way I take care of my health. I watch people in my age category. In fact, just the last couple weeks, I've had this vein on my leg that I've tried for a couple of decades to heal naturally with herbs and different natural things, and I just couldn't get it. It stayed the same. It was this kind of bulgy varicose vein on one of my legs, and I think it's been fine, because my weight is good. I exercise every day, but I'm just like, I just had this intuition. I need to take care of this. And so I was intentional. I made appointments with 4 different vein clinics, and I was very, very intentional. And I had it taken care of earlier this week, and it was smooth and it was perfect. And it was I'm not quite sure why I was telling you this. Well, that was intentional. Okay, so maybe that's what it. So to me, what I want to be is I want to be more grounded. I want to be more aware. And I don't need to hear this stuff. I don't need to hear every headline, every opinion, or every bit of fear. Every time there's a spike of fear, I like to know what's going on in the world, but we're not designed for the details of this, and it's in our face all the time. Okay, so because I care too much to keep adding the noise to something that already has enough of it. I care too much to keep adding noise to something that already has enough of it. So there's enough noise, and I care too much to keep adding noise to it. Okay, so instead of asking what is happening to the world, so think about it this way. I've started realizing I can ask something more useful. And this, how do I want to show up while this is happening? That's the better question. Okay, I don't want to say what is happening to the world, because then you're leaving yourself as a helpless, hopeless victim. Instead, how do I want to show up while this is happening? Okay, I've lived through enough. Here's what I wrote. So I'm going to finish it. Because I've lived enough life to know this. Big changes don't just reveal what's happening in the world. When these big changes happen, it's not just revealing that. What happens is it reveals who I am. It reveals me. And it reveals you. And that maybe is the hard truth. Look in the mirror. What is this revealing? And like I said, I've had less than proud moments. I've had very unpretty moments. I've had come out of moments and I was like, who was that? Who is that? Like, what is happening? You know, it reveals us. We can either step up to the challenge of becoming better or whatever, or whatever. So it reveals me, and it reveals, and what it reveals about the moment is this really big moment. That's what I wrote. This really big moment. This is a big moment, you guys. I hope that you realize that, because we are in this together. And I think many of us that see the world a certain way and are preparing and there's going to reach a moment, I believe, in the not too distant future, where we are going to need to be there to help others. And because there are people who just simply, they haven't had access to information or people or whatever. So what I feel like is this, is giving me a chance to be a little more awake, a little more honest, and a little more deliberate about the kind of future that I'm helping to create. That's what all this does. And here's what I've realized. I'm still learning. I'm still a human. But the cool thing is this, I'm not asleep. And the layer on top of that is I've decided I'm not sitting this one out. I'm going to play. I'm here to play the game. And here we are. So I would love to know what you guys think about this. I'm sure that many of you can relate. In fact, I sometimes look at the back end of my YouTube channel, and I can see the analytics, and it gives me an idea of the age range of the people who watch. And you guys are all in my age range. There's of course some younger ones, but the core is my age, around there, and a little bit older, a little bit younger. But I know I'm preaching to the choir with these things, the things that we see, the things that we've lived through. The fact that our kids are grown and we have grandchildren, and some people might, I have a couple of very good girlfriends that are my age and they never had children, but they still lived through all of these things. And it's been interesting to watch how people have navigated this. So I'd love to know what you think about this, guys. Just realize we live at the most epic time ever to be here and to be aware. So I hope you have a beautiful Sunday, and we will see you next time.